Anyways, it's a pleasure to be here, and thank you so much, Pete, for inviting me. Thank you so much for Phocuswright for welcoming me. I'm super excited to be here. I also want to say that I've been listening in to most of the conference, and thank you to the entrepreneurs. Holy cow, you guys are putting together some great ideas. You guys are putting your heart and soul into it. You can tell some of you have not been sleeping. I don't mean that as an insult. I just know that you've been working super hard, and you've been putting all of you're probably putting your whole life towards this thing, this idea, and we need that. And I can't imagine how hard it is right now, because it's hard enough to drive a startup, more or less, also try to do it in the time of COVID and some interesting times. But hang in there, and please, take care of yourselves. It's really important that we all get basically some ability to recover physically and mentally. And it's super important if you're trying to change an industry and trying to invent something. I think we all appreciate that. And thank you all so much. All right, now what I'm going to try to do is actually share my screen and my slides. So bear with me. I'm going to see how this goes. There we go. All right. Well, I just want to start off that, pre-COVID, something had happened. I read something in the news that really saddened me, and that was Larry Tesler, as they said here in the Washington Post. He passed away at 74, and they called him the inventor of copy and paste. And when I read this, I was really saddened. I was saddened for a couple of reasons. One is that I was saddened that such a legend in the industry had passed away. And for those who don't know who he is, I'll go over his past. And then I was sad because he was a colleague of mine, and I was sad for his family, and I was sad for his friends. And, there's a lot of people that he touched and he worked with. And, we all felt the same way, which was what a remarkable life. And he did so many remarkable things. And it was sad to see him pass away. For those of you who don't know who he is, he was a leading researcher at Park during the 70s. And in the 70s, they had put together this research group to really just try to explore the future of computing. And there, he had the idea to put together the first graphical interface in 1979. He worked with Steve Jobs in 83 to launch Apple Lisa. And then, in 84, he launched the first Mac. And he had a shared dream at Park, and it was extended into Apple, which was, hey, they had this dream, which is, hey, can we put a computer in every single home? And it was a profound idea. It was such a radical idea at the time. And they were able to accomplish so much. And he was a pioneer, and he was able to contribute so much to this particular idea. For those who don't remember, or in the 1970s, there's this YouTube video that's awesome, which is they're trying to teach kids how to use computers from the 70s. And you can imagine looking at a screen like this and looking at a computing device like this, like it was very daunting. And what made it really daunting was that computers were not built to be user-friendly. In fact, they were the exact opposite. And in order to do anything in computing, some of you may actually remember this. Many of you will have no idea what I'm talking about. But how computers worked is that you actually had to enter these things called modes. And so if you wanted to move a piece of text, for example, you had to enter move mode and then leave in move mode by pushing escape. And if you wanted to copy something, you had to put it into copy mode, and then you had to go into leave it and then go into paste mode. And that made computers very, very cumbersome to use. And Larry, one of his ideas, he thought, one of the things we should do is we should take people into a lab, train them how to use a computer, and then see where they have difficulty, and then actually have them leave and then come back, let's say in a week, and then test them again to see what they recalled. And by the way, here is actually a copy of his original notes. He published some of his original notes on Twitter, and I found them. I think they're amazing. But this gives you a sense of, like, on the bottom, like what those commands were. You had to enter every one of those commands. And what he found was, when he was doing the research, that almost nobody could remember any of the commands. They needed a cheat sheet. Nobody remembered JB, jump to the beginning. Nobody remembered JE, which was jump to the end. Nobody remembered, like, replace that you had to push Control R. Like, nobody could remember these things. And so even though they would train them on how to use these computers, like, nobody could remember how to use these computers. So, it was through a number of these tests that he started developing these ideas in regards to, if we have this dream, we want to have computing in every home, we want to make it more accessible to everybody, we've got to get rid of this notion that there are modes. And so this is where he developed this principle. It's a very famous principle. It's called Larry's principle. And it was this idea that there should be no modes. We should not have computing where we have to ask people to do things unnaturally. We can't ask people to use computers by using it, by accessing it through modes. We should live in a world where we, the technology industry, we should have no modes. And that was basically the slogan, a very, very famous slogan. And he did it at a time, by the way, where it was very accepted that this is the way computers worked. And so for him to have this idea was a very radical idea. And by the way, like I loved the last session when we were talking about the panel where, the discussion was, hey, maybe the Black travelers is a very small niche. Well, maybe that is basically the notion that we have at this time, that we just accept certain things and we have to challenge these notions. And back then in computing, like almost every computer scientist was really focused on how do you improve processing power? How do you improve the computing speed? And they didn't worry about user accessibility or user experience. So, I think what made Larry Tesler remarkable was this no modes idea. Not only was it a powerful idea that inspired Steve Jobs, inspired a whole new line of thinking in regards to how do we really truly bring the computer to every home. What Larry also did was that, that principle really set forth and inspired a whole generation of great independent thinkers in the world of computer science. There's probably not one great independent thinker that we can think of, or great philosopher that we can think of, or any of the fathers or mothers of computer science back then who were not inspired by Larry Tesler and his thinking around, hey, can we set forth a set of principles that we can live by? This is my, by the way, this is my 13-month-old daughter. At 13 months, she can use an iPhone. And what's remarkable to me is just how far the world has come. So we've left the world just, maybe a generation ago where we had to access computers through modes. And now we live in a time where people are born, and by the time, before they could even say maybe their first word, they can use the iPhone. They can access computing. They can actually access all human knowledge. So I just go back to, what did Larry do? Because they called him the father of cut and paste. But when you really think about it, he had a vision, which was to make computing more accessible to everyone. He identified a real core blocker that got in the way, which was this idea of modes. He developed a principle to attack these obstacles, and then he dedicated his entire life towards this idea. And this was really his identity. And if you've ever seen Larry Tesler drive in San Jose, or he also lived in Seattle, you would see him with this license plate. This really was a core part of his identity. He truly believed in it. When I met him at Yahoo, he worked there for a while. I remember my first meeting with him. It was very exciting because I, wanted to bring up, hey, you had this principle, no modes. And I was curious what he thought would be a follow-on principle, that, what other ideas he might have, what he saw as the big computing problems of our time and our generation. And what he told me, he ended the meeting with this, which is, hey, John, if you don't see modes, then you're not seeing the world. Modes are everywhere. And he ended the meeting. It was quite remarkable. I remember because I was so excited to meet him, and I thought, wow, that's your advice. But as I went back to my desk and I really thought about like what he had taught me or what he had explained to me, it was true, is that we still have modes everywhere. We just have to look closely enough. And I think, like, as we start to think about travel now, and we think about what's occurred in the world, I think COVID is exposing us. It's exposing the entire industry, which is that we're making it super hard. We make it super hard to travel. There's pain all across the entire journey. Some of the entrepreneurs in their pitches, they've been identifying some of these pain points. It's our job as an industry to try to remove this pain. We need to envision a world where can we envision a world actually, where there's no modes for travel? in the same way that they were really focused on those obstacles for computing, can we make travel more accessible? And then I think it's important for all the entrepreneurs to really remember this idea, which is that ideas come and go. Ideas come and go, but inventing should be based on principle. And so when we call Larry Tesler the father of cut and paste, like, it is inadequate to call him that, because he really truly believed in this principle, and everything that he did was based on this idea that he could make it easier, that the world can make it easier for people to access computing. And we need to invent on this idea that we can make travel more accessible for everyone. Well, Larry lived in a time where, you know, home computing was the big trend that he was trying to invest in. As we now fast forward to our time, we have some major trends now that we have to pay attention to. And so there's some things that, you know, I'm really paying close attention to, which is, hey, we're living in a time where we have to really consider and think about the breakthroughs in processing power in AI over the next decade. You know, I saw a bunch of ideas that were being pitched around the idea of mass productization of data. And this is a real trend and something that we have to pay close attention to. And then third, I didn't see enough of this, but there is this emerging element, other than the augmented reality presentation, which I really appreciated, that we are living in a time where user experiences are going to go through a massive game change. And as we start to think about these trends, like your smartphone today, if you own an iPhone 10, think about this. That smartphone has more computing power than every single computing device combined in the world in 1986. And so Michael Jordan was drafted in 1984. So that means that was 2 years after. It wasn't that long ago. We now have all of that power on our devices today. So if you were to then project forward and actually put onto a graph, how much processing power, in how many years will we have all the processing power that is available today in the world, every device combined, every computer combined? When will we have then maybe an equivalent of a phone, because we don't know what it's going to look like? In 34 years, we will have as much power personally as available today on Earth. So like, we continue this trend, so we might envision, what does that world look like? Now, if you were to meet someone with that much power, if someone were to walk in the room saying, hey, I can basically access all processing power on Earth, you would think of that person as God. We're headed towards that. This is the world we're headed towards. Every day, 2.5 quintillion bytes of data are being created. Here's the thing to think about, right? 90% of the world's data was created in the last 24 months. And that continues to be a trend. It's not stopping. So as we start to think forward in regards to, hey, as we look at that timeline, we see this incredible access that we're going to have, incredible power that's going to be generated, and then the incredible data that we haven't even seen before. In the next 24 months, we will see data that we've never seen before, and it will be productized. The cost of storage has declined 50% every 14 months for the last 30 years. And we don't see that slowing anytime soon. And we're productizing a lot more of it. What do I mean by that? Well, we're datafying it, and then we're putting the data in a form where it's machine analyzable and machine readable. And so we're able to scale these massive data sets to solve problems we've just never been able to solve before. And again, I saw a little bit of this element in the pitches in regards to datafication and solving some of the issues in terms of commissions that, perhaps like 4 years ago, it was just a pipe dream. But today, in today's world where we're starting to productize this data, more and more use cases like that can emerge. And then this is providing us the energy to build basically game-changing user experiences. Tech giants today, they're spending about $5 billion alone on voice recognition alone. The entire industry is spending about $135 billion in the US just to do video marketing. And then we are right on the precipice for a breakthrough in AI in basically photoshopping video. That's the best way of thinking about it. I know that people call it deep fakes, but it is really about this idea that you can manipulate video to the point where you cannot discern it from reality. And, you know, just to show you just how far we've come, like people are putting together very interesting pieces of content.
You know, it's funny what a young man recollects, because I don't remember being born. I don't recall what I got for my first Christmas. I don't know when I went on my first outdoor picnic, but I do remember the first time I heard the sweetest voice in the wide world.
You can sit here if you want.
Now, you know, and by the way, typically people when they're watching the video are laughing, and we laugh because how realistic this looks. And by the way, what we're talking about, what we're viewing is just a hobby. These are people at home just messing around, playing around. This is not like the industry, which can put together large budgets to actually invest and productize and produce things at massive scale at high quality. So I give basically the same advice that Larry Tesler gave me, which is that we have to live in this world where we invent on principle. And we think that and I believe that the intersection of the next great company is going to be at the intersection of these two things, which is these major tech trends, which are changing the way that we really think about the world and the business that will emerge. And this idea that we've got to make it easier for travelers. So no modes for travel. Thank you so much. And thank you so much for your time. And thank you to all the entrepreneurs for putting in your time, your effort, and your life towards invention.